Thank you. If you remain for the next press conference, I think you'll be pleased. The United Planet Faith and Science Initiative, which is our sponsor here, will be holding another Climate Matters talk show, TV talk show out of the press conference room. I'm your host, Stuart Scott, and we're coming live from Paris, France, from Le Bourget, COP21, the 21st Conference of Parties. There we go. Thank you. Here's my email address if anyone would like to get in touch after this presentation. Thank you. Now, our website is climatematters.tv, and here are some hashtags if you're tweeting out there in internet land. When I grew up, it was out there in TV land or out there in radio land, but now it's out there in internet land. And we have with us today two guests. First, Professor Paul Beckwith, who is a climate change researcher and educator. He's with the Department of Geography of the University of Ottawa. And sitting next to him, our guest is Baba Brinkman, and he has a master's in comparative literature and is by profession a rapper and playwright. And we will literally hear from Baba in a little while. Now, our topic today is abrupt change. We are entering a period of abrupt change, ecological change, economic change, social change. We can already see it. There is a flood, or the beginnings of a flood of immigration to Europe that has at its root, a lot of it is climate change, is the heating of the planet and the social disruptions. And this is just the beginning. So it's the beginning of a flood of changes. Now we'll first introduce, I'll let my two guests introduce themselves and speak to us for a couple minutes, and I'll just ask why, my question is, why did you come to the COP? Paul?
Yeah, so I'm Paul Beckwith. I'm a part-time professor at the University of Ottawa. I teach climate change, meteorology, oceanography, environmental issues, and I came to the COP because I think that people are underestimating the risks that we face from abrupt climate change, specifically in the Arctic region.
Yeah, and we will return to the Arctic region because those of you here at the COP know very well what the IPCC is and their report, but on the internet people may be less familiar. The IPCC is a body of 2,500 scientists who prepare and update a report periodically that is supposed to advise policymakers. However, that report, by and large, omits the matter of a methane release that is already underway in the Arctic. The reason that it omits it is because it has not been studied for long enough to be modeled. And so they don't understand it in a way that they can try to predict. And yet, so they're ignoring a phenomenon that has huge ramifications because it can't be factored into the models. You know, some people say this is a travesty, but I'm going to let Paul go into that methane release a little bit later. And Baba, why did you come to the COP?
Well, I'm a rap artist by trade, and I've covered various subjects in the albums that I put out, and I recently started writing rap songs about climate change because I feel like there is a bridge that's required between the science and the public, and this is a subject on which there's a large scientific consensus, and a lot of public confusion, both on the science and also on the necessary legislative and social changes that are going to be required to address the problem. So I thought that's a good communication challenge for a rapper. Let's see if I could put that into rhymes. And why I came to the COP, I think how I came to the COP is more interesting, because how does a rapper get into the COP anyway?
How did you get into the COP?
The way I got in is I had a meeting with the organizers of the Coalition for Rainforest Nations, who are advocating for the REDD+ mechanism to be included in the agreement, which I agree with. And I told them, if you get me into the COP, then I will come to your meetings and summarize them in rap format, and help to synthesize the ideas and inspire the ministers, and then help them to end their meetings with a bit of levity and enjoyment, so that they're ready to go do battle in the next round of meetings. And they said, okay, we feel you could be an asset to us. And they got me here, and I'm here now doing performances as well as gathering information for an off-Broadway production of my new sort of hip-hop theater show, The Rap Guide to Climate Chaos, which will be premiering in New York in February as a public science communication vehicle.
Where will it be in New York? What theater? Do you have one yet?
Yeah, it's called the Soho Playhouse on Van Dam Street, and we've got a 6-week run starting in February.
That gives me, I'm a New York boy by birth, and that gives me another good reason to go home, visit my brother. Well, you bring a number of very interesting things to the table. I'll quote myself. I believe that the changes that we need to see, the solution, if there is such a thing, of the climate change problem is more likely to come from Hollywood than from Washington, D.C. And I say Hollywood as a symbol. The entertainment industry has a vast influence on the human psyche, on our youth especially. And if we can get more rappers, more musicians, more actors and playwrights treating this as an urgent situation, then I think we'll perhaps move society faster. So thank you very much. And we'll let you we'll let the audience sample a bit of your wares later.
Great. And I should also mention, if anyone wants a press copy, I have Eco Rap CDs, some copies of them at the back. Just come grab one off me at the end.
We tend not to be commercial here on this show, so are you talking about giving them away? Because I want one.
For free. I mean, like press copies.
Just want to make sure that because we are non-commercial in nature. My own proclivity, my own belief is that the problem is our economic system, and that money makes the world go round. Does that kind of ring a bell? And
of course, the question is, if they don't pay for them, will they value them as much?
Well, how do we establish our value system then? That's the bigger question. And if our value system is only based upon money, then we've got a problem, basic problem. Show me the money. It's in our language. It's in our psyches. We need to change that. We need to value human life and other things, intangibles, more than
starting today.
There you go. How many do you have? I don't want there to be a rush to the... Okay.
Probably about 12 or 15.
Okay, that's enough to cover our audience. And those out in internet land will have to, I guess, send me an email if they want to get one afterwards.
Yeah, the more eco-friendly version is to download it online, certainly, and there are.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. There you go. Okay, well, I want one of them. Please save one for me.
And therein lies the problem.
No, I haven't purchased any gifts this trip. I'd love to be able to come away from Paris and say I didn't buy any souvenirs, and still have something to give. Now, Paul, I'm going to ask you to help us out here and put on your professorly garb and take it away, so to speak. And if you would, you want to go up and make like the weatherman.
Carry the mic.
Oh yes, no, I'm sorry. You need to say. Can we get the portable microphone?
Okay, so the CO2 level is one of the things that we've been talking about a lot at the COP. Okay, the COP is all about reducing emissions, and the reason for reducing emissions is because we have built up too many greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And the one most talked about is CO2. And many people will have seen this. This is the atmospheric concentration over about almost 1 million years. And it's gone up and down with the ice age and warm periods, but right now it's off of the chart. We've just passed 400 parts per million. This is the whole problem. We've changed the chemistry of the atmosphere. Now, could I have the next slide, please? So this is a shorter time scale, 1960 to close to today. And you can see the CO2 level rising. We're rising 2 to 3 parts per million per year each year, and the rise is
zigzag like that?
Increasing.
Why does it zigzag up and down?
And it's zigzagging because when in the northern hemisphere, most of the vegetation is there. So in the spring, when the leaves form on the trees, they pull a lot of CO2 out of the atmosphere, and we get a dip. And then in the fall, when the leaves fall off the deciduous trees, and there's no longer CO2 being absorbed, the trees go dormant in the winter, and we get a rise. So it's like the Earth is breathing, in a way. But it's not just the chemistry of the atmosphere that we have changed. We've also changed the chemistry of the ocean. So this curve here shows the rise of CO2 in the seawater just in the last couple decades. Now, when you get more CO2 in the seawater, you get carbonic acid formed, and that is why the oceans are acidifying. So we measure that with the pH, which is a logarithmic scale, and it's dropping down here. So why is this a problem? Next slide, please.
Well, first, what is the logarithmic scale? Again, I want to...
Yes. So it may not look like a large drop in pH, but for every unit of pH that you drop, you have a factor of, the acidity increases by a factor of 10. So the next slide shows a longer time scale. So we've got the last 25 million years along this axis. So the pH of the open ocean, the surface water, has fluctuated. As you can see, there's been some fluctuation. The lower the value, the more acidic the ocean. So in 2000, we were here. Now we're over here. So the problem is the pH of the open ocean has fallen from about 8.2 to 8.05 in the last 30 years.
Can you tell us how they measure the pH of ancient oceans?
There's Argo floats throughout the ocean that are floating freely. There's also tethered floats, and any ships that are traveling can measure the acidity, which is basically the amount of hydrogen ions in the ocean.
So that's the current, but then ancient would be through what, cores taken down through the sediment, or?
Yes. Oh, to measure the older values, yes. You can measure the amounts of calcium. When there's, like a lot of sea creatures form calcium in their shells. This is part of the structure of the creature, and that includes many forms of phytoplankton, which are the base of the food chain. So when the pH is too low, right now we're about 8.05. When we get down to 7.9, 7.8, oysters can't form shells, lobsters can't form shells, phytoplankton can't, and the behavior at the base of the food chain changes. So this is a very serious issue. Some people call this the evil twin of climate change. We talk about the atmosphere and CO2 levels, but there's very little talk about the oceans.
And I've been picking up headlines about how the oysters and other shellfish industries, where they have to create the seeds for new oysters and then plant them because they're not reproducing naturally. The larvae are not able to form shells in the open ocean anymore in certain areas of Alaska. So it's already impacting our food chain.
Yes, the oceans are very threatened.
If I may, when I say our food chain, I caught myself there. I fell into that trap of human beings feeling like everything out there is for us. So let's change that to the food chain. We have to respect that other species have a right to live too, and we're definitely impacting the ecosphere in which other things need to live.
Okay, so next slide, please. So what else are we changing? Besides the chemistry of the atmosphere and ocean, we're changing the very nature of the Arctic. If you look at the Arctic from space, you see white. The white is from the sea ice, and it's from the snow cover. Now, this is the sea ice area from over time, okay? And the models, the IPCC models, they use about 20 or 30 climate models. They use equations to model what's going on, and you put in as many parameters as you know about. And the average of all those models is the black line, and the gray is the extreme from the range of all of the models, of the ensemble, if you like. What the data is showing is the red. The red is the observations. It's what we're seeing. So clearly, the models are severely underestimating the loss of the sea ice extent over time. And this was a minimum here, and then up. But the general trend is much lower than the models. Okay, so next slide, please.
Before you go on to the next slide, two things. One, the IPCC report depends upon these models. Our policymakers are advised by these models. And interestingly enough, if you're here at the COP, the Conference of Parties, and you go back through Gare du Nord, the northern railway station in Paris, on the walls of the platform are beautiful color panels with mathematical equations. I thought it was just art, but then I was told by someone that those are the equations that run these models. And it was kind of mind-boggling that we are negotiating the fate of the Earth based upon these mathematical symbols more than the evidence of our eyes that species are disappearing, that forests are burning all around the Earth. I would say it's another example of human hubris, that we think that we're so smart. One of my friends who was here was saying that we should not be called Homo sapiens, which means wise standing animal, if I'm not mistaken. We should be called Homo calidus, that is clever. We're clever, but we're not that wise, perhaps. Anyhow, I'm sorry for that interruption, Professor.
Okay, so as fast as the sea ice is falling, the snow cover in the Arctic in the spring is following at an even faster rate. So you see the curve, the last curve was the sea ice dropping. The snow cover on the land is also dropping. Underneath the snow cover, of course, is darker permafrost. Underneath the sea ice is the dark ocean. So the actual reflectivity of the entire Arctic has decreased. It's getting darker, so it's absorbing more solar energy, so it's heating for that reason. So this shows you the temperature distribution on the planet. We're fixated on 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees, which is the global average temperature, but it's the distribution that's key. So what you can see is the bright red at the top is between 2 and 4 degrees of increase overall, and this is from 1960 to 2011. So in that 5 decades, the high Arctic has warmed, up 2, 3, 4 degrees. In fact, this curve shows the warming with latitude. So much higher in the Arctic. This is South Antarctica, Arctic. So it's much, much higher in the Arctic. Now, why is this important? This is very important for weather patterns, because the jet streams which guide storms, next slide please, I'll show you okay, so the jet streams guide storms, and they can be thought of as a wall between cold, dry Arctic air and warm, humid equatorial air.
It's kind of like the air curtain in a department store that is heated on the inside and cold on the outside, or vice versa.
You can consider it as almost like a wall. So the cold air is above, and the warm air is below. So I talked to a friend in Canada. He's a meteorologist. He said it's 12 degrees Celsius right now in Canada, in Ottawa, and the mean average temperature is -5 degrees. So we're almost, approaching 20 degrees Celsius, warmer than normal. This isn't just one day. This is for a period of weeks. Now,
there's a hidden issue in there. People who experience this unusually warm weather but are not well informed about climate change or don't have it on their mind are very pleased. Right? Nice spring day. Excuse me again, but I went to the Eiffel Tower before the COP started, and at one side of the Eiffel Tower were leaves in orange and yellow. There was a tree just losing its leaves. And on the other side of the esplanade there were trees that were putting out their spring blossoms. And it was December 6th.
Yeah, it confuses nature. I mean, we're used to going further north and it being colder, and that would happen if the jet streams were just running from west to east. But because they're so wavy, they're moving slower, then you can go north, far north here, and be much, much warmer than you are very far south. So the next slide, please. This is a schematic. Okay, so this is actual data from an excellent site. If you Google Earth Null School, you can get all kinds of climate data real time. So this is that you can get data for the previous day. So this is the jet streams, which fly about the altitude of commercial aircraft, jets, that's the name. And you can see how wavy it is. So this will be very cold here, very cold here, very warm here. You can see these ridges and troughs, and these things get stuck, and they're moving more slowly. So if a storm system is laden with water and it's moving more slowly, it will tend to drop most of that precipitation in one area. So we're seeing many areas, many cities where we might get 3 or 4 months of rain in one night, which we never had before. So Norway has seen 1 in 200-year floods. The UK, Europe is being hit very hard right now. We'll take a
Have a seat for a moment, Paul.
Okay.
Before we leave this slide and let Baba give us a little bit of relief from the left brain, we'll go to the right brain. Last winter, when I was home from COP20, we had a very cold spell in Hawaii. Hawaii is my home. I moved there before I realized that climate change was the big one. I was trying to get to an environmentally pure area. And so I looked at this website that Paul just mentioned. And what was it again? They should Google?
Just Earth Null School.
Earth Null.
N-U-L-L.
Null School. And I Googled it, and I saw this map, but there was a spike of cold air headed right towards the Hawaiian Islands. And it wasn't a nice curve. It was a spike. So something, because there's active volcanicity, there's the Kilauea volcano going off now all the time, was attracting that point down. It was so interesting to see, but we got a very cold winter for Hawaii. Yeah. In any case, we'll let up on the audience a little bit, and we'll ask you, Baba, to lay it on us.
So what contributions can a rapper and citizen make to climate change awareness? Rap songs, right? They're telling us we're standing on a precipice and we need to convert the global economy and make it emissionless, and those emissions are caused by every single one of our jobs, like every one of us contributing carbon emissions to the smog. For instance, if I write a rhyme trying to describe climate change and it's hot so it catches on, pretty soon someone's going to fly me someplace to perform it. And the appeal of that is enormous. It's not an option for me to turn down work for global warming because I make it hot. People say my rhymes are dope. I twist words until they're unrecognizable. I make it hot. I make it easy for sheezy. So hot, even climate change skeptics will believe me. I make it hot, like the temperature it needs to be before the Tea Party will believe the IPCC. I make it hot. I liquefy the Greenland ice sheet. 7 meters of sea level rise. That'll do nicely. And yeah, humans are adaptable and we can toughen up, but that response ignores people who feel like it's already tough enough. Make a list of countries that nobody visits as a tourist. They have low carbon emissions. The richest inflicted this on the poorest. We did it by heating our houses and feeding our spouses and flying and driving places and having no patience for power outages. The Pope calls it anthropocentric. He calls it obnoxious, but I got work to do, and work takes energy to accomplish, and I make it hot. Yeah, turn up the heat on the crowd. You make it hot too, though, so don't try to be weaseling out. We make it hot, hot like the African sun, like the Paleocene, Eocene thermal maximum. I make it hot. Feel that bass when it vibrates. Hot like the permafrost releasing methyl hydrates. Hot, yeah, like a planet with low albedo, like me rocking a trench coat on a beach instead of a Speedo. Hot with no apologies, but still I'm feeling a lot of grief for the impact my lifestyle has on the planet's ecology. My carbon footprint is bigger than Krypton.
cryptozoologies. I'm talking Loch Ness monstrous, so I'm not at peace because the aggregate effect of every decision I'm making is tragic. But I can't just quit. They say that we're carbon emission addicts, but that's just glib. You want me to live in poverty abject, and if I did, what happens to greenhouse gases on average? If I quit and you don't, it's still hell in a handbasket, a traffic jam with no plan of action. Fantastic. This is a classic arms race that we're trapped in. It's ominous, self-interested parties trapped in a tragedy of the commons, and the problem is caused by our collective emissions of carbon, but the person who emits is not the person emissions are harming, so it's a failure of the market, because everyone is incentivized to pollute as much as they can get away with and catch a free ride. So it's no surprise to see global emissions on the rise. When the cost of burning fossil fuel is externalized, it's effectively subsidized. It's paid for by the victims of the eventual climate impacts that are caused by our emissions. And Bill McKibben and The Guardian have been targeting investments like dirty energy is the new tobacco. So keep your distance from anybody making a profit off of fossil fuels. Cool, I'm down with the boycott. I'm just boycotting myself too, because I make it hot, hotter than refugees. Picture a hot 100 million displaced Bangladeshis. I make it hot. Yeah, I cause a heat wave. How about 9 degrees hotter than the hottest ones these days? I make it hot. I spit flames, rap metaphors, a 5-alarm blaze consuming the last redwood forest. I make it hot. What if I make it 6 degrees? That would cause the extinction of 40% of species. Hot. So what are we left with? A speeding train with no brakes, some kind of a death wish, a scientific consensus that we're standing on a precipice, and a population with no idea of how to reduce their emissions. Some people do offset their footprint voluntarily with the milk of human altruism, hope, faith, and charity, but that's not going to cut it. Look, it's not counterproductive, but we got a global carbon budget, and it's globally busted, and there are hundreds of gigatons that we would have to offset. You might as well donate your piggy bank to the national debt. I ain't got no spare change to donate to carbon offsetting. I don't even want to calculate my footprint. I find it upsetting. It's like the medieval Catholic Church indulgence selling. If you get a Big Mac and a Diet Coke, your belly is still swelling. But here's what I'm willing. I'd be willing to pay a tax, like a fee that's calculated against my carbon impacts and globally harmonized, to switch incentives around, make sure most of the carbon stays safely under the ground. But I'm not going to pay it. Not unless you pay it too. That way I can be sure that you'll do what you say you'll do. How about everyone has to pay it? No free riders allowed. No international pact with the US or India or China left out. Yeah, you can either invest it in programs or mitigation or dividend it back to me. But either way, I won't be happy until they're carbon taxing me, because then I can make it hot without feeling a chill. I'm just sick of this feeling of guilt, killing my high when I'm feeling a thrill. So I make it hot. Yeah, I get your emotions aroused. If we don't get those hot, we won't keep the oceans down. So let's make it hot. People, let's turn up the heat on polluters trying to catch a ride on all the rest of us for free. I make it hot on the mic and in my social life when I agitate for my friends to agitate for a carbon price. That's how you make it hot. Thank you.
I'm supposed to do a fist bump, I think.
Right,
Wow, that was worth the price of admission, shall we say? Now, I heard him do one of these raps yesterday, and I was a little nervous because we had some faith leaders with us and scientists, and we had the former Archbishop of Canterbury sitting in the front seat, and
Are you suggesting that was blasphemous?
He did a rap based upon Laudato Si and the Vatican's tweeting after Laudato Si encyclical was done, and you really got to see that program. Now, all of these programs that we've done here, and this is the 11th, are available at climatematters.tv. So please go and check some of them out. That was the, well, check them all out. Now, thank you. Can we get our slides back? There we go.
So next slide, please. So because the Arctic is warming so much, we're seeing lots of Greenland melt. We're also seeing Antarctic melt, and combining them, notice the curve, it's not linear. So the curve is going up in an exponential form. So the doubling time, every 5 to 7 years, the rate of melt from Greenland and Antarctica doubles. So if you just carry this forward, if it continues to double, we're talking about enormous sea level rises. You can just calculate on the back of an envelope 7 meters by 2070. Hopefully this doesn't happen, right? We can't let this happen. Next slide, please.
We're going to have to...
Okay, we're going to wrap it up. So this is sea ice. It's decreasing every month. Now, the solutions, I consider a three-legged stool. We only talk about one leg at the COP. We need to zero emissions as soon as possible. To stay under 1.5 degrees, we need to zero emissions by 2030. To stay under 2 degrees, we need to zero emissions by 2050. But this isn't enough, I would argue. We need CO2 removal methods. We need to biomimicry. We need to take CO2 out of the atmosphere, and also solar radiation management. We need to look at that.
They didn't pull the plug on our wrapper, but they're pulling the plug on the science. I'm sorry, the UN has to keep to a very strict timeline. I didn't get the warning, so forgive me. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Again, this has been another Climate Matters show coming to you live from COP21 in Paris. Thank you.
Thanks.